you to Vandergraaf for sponsoring this month's edition of Road to Recovery. Visit their website for more information about the Vandergraaf drum motor, designed specifically for heavy industry applications.
But big picture too, I mean, there's personnel change, some leadership change coming to the agency. As I reflect back on 2016-17, Bill, it seemed like it took forever. I mean, almost the whole calendar year of 2017 went by between inauguration day of Donald Trump to David Tetezela kind of becoming the head of MSHA. I wonder, is that, 10, 11 month timeline, is that pretty standard for getting somebody into that spot at MSHA? And is that a fair timeline to kind of expect to follow in 2021?
Well, let me say this. It's almost a given that we're going to see an emergency temporary standard before we see an assistant secretary for MSHA. That's not necessarily the standard timeline, but all of this will depend on the Biden administration's priorities with respect to confirmation. Their first focus will be will be on cabinet secretaries. In this case, with respect to the MSHA world, that will be the labor secretary. And you're right. You're absolutely right. In 2017, the labor secretary was not confirmed until April of that year. Dave Tetezela at MSHA then wasn't confirmed until November of that year. Labor MSHA OSHA team is usually put together a little more quickly in a Democratic administration because of different priorities that they might have. So I think you'll see an assistant secretary more quickly at MSHA than we did in 2017. But again, a lot of things can happen, especially with the COVID focus right now. You just don't know where the emphasis will be. I think everyone's probably heard that Joe Biden has nominated Marty Walsh, the mayor of Boston, to be the new labor secretary. Marty Walsh is a former union official. He was the leader of the Boston Building and Construction Trades Council. It was sort of an umbrella organization of many different labor organizations. He's also a close friend of Rich Trumka, who is the president of the AFL-CIO, and I think everyone listening here would also know that Rich Trumka is the former president of the United Mine Workers. The one thing that I think you can take from all of that, while I don't have a name to throw at you in terms of people that are being considered at this point, is that whoever takes that position, he or she will be heavily vetted by the unions. And I think you can expect that whoever the candidate is that's nominated will probably be someone either from a union or who runs a state safety organization and has ties to the Democratic Party and to labor. Again, no guarantee, but it does seem like that's a fairly likely scenario in this particular situation. The one thing I will say is, the agency really could use leadership that has a stronger connection to the metal non-metal industry, given the sort of the hold that the coal side and the coal community has had on that position, and the fact that the metal non-metal side of MSHA, in terms of its stakeholders, is the vast majority of its stakeholders. It would be helpful to have someone who has a little closer understanding of the issues that go on in metal non-metal operations. But that's just my plug at this point.
Yeah, there was certainly a push for somebody from within metal non-metal, even within the aggregate industry 4 years ago, and that didn't necessarily pan out. But do you think that opportunity that was pursued maybe 4 years ago, Bill, did that kind of educate some people that, hey, the mining industry is not necessarily the coal industry anymore? I mean, in terms of the number of miners in the industry, I mean, it's such a fraction of what metal non-metal is. Is it so? To put a question to it, is it likely this time that we'll see representative with more experience in metal non-metal, or maybe even aggregate, although I know that's probably unlikely because it's such a small part of that term, metal, non-metal.
Right. I hope that it is, but the reality in terms of this process in the past is that the United Mine Workers do have always have a very strong voice in these decisions with the Democratic administration. And depending on what your perspective is, that's either a good thing or a bad thing. I'm not making a judgment at this point, but I will say that they have had a major role to play in these types of decisions in the past, and they don't have a big footprint, obviously, on the metal non-metal side. So the people that they tend to push forward are people that have more experience on the coal side. So again, I'm optimistic, but I also I'm practical in my understanding that it doesn't necessarily work out the way that I think it should.
Thank you to Vandergraaf for sponsoring this month's edition of Road to Recovery. Visit their website for more information about the Vandergraaf drum motor designed specifically for heavy industry applications.